Hello and welcome back to Show Me the Ropes, the podcast where I explore the people, ideas, and builders shaping our region's growth. My name is McNeil Stout, and I'm excited about today's guest. If you've been following the wave of new industrial and commercial development in Middle Tennessee, you've likely noticed some standout projects popping up around Nashville. And a big part of that success comes from TI Builders, one of the region's top general contractors. TI Builders has earned its reputation as one of the best design-build general contractors in Middle Tennessee. With more than 30 years of experience and over 2,000 completed jobs under their belt since 1988, they're truly a leader in the field. What sets them apart is their seamless turnkey approach from initial concept and entitlement to permitting, engineering, design, and construction. And when it comes to industrial and manufacturing projects, they've completed over 500 across a range of sizes, from modest 1,000 square foot facilities to massive 125,000 square foot operations. Based right here in Middle Tennessee, TI Builders' Nashville headquarters anchors an expansive footprint that spans from California to Central Texas, Boston, Tampa, Indianapolis, Phoenix, and Pennsylvania. Their network fuels local projects with national expertise. Today, we're honored to have Justin Pack from TI Builders joining us to dig into their recent industrial developments here in Middle Tennessee, how they balance design and construction so smoothly, and what's next on the horizon for this dynamic team. Justin, thank you for jumping on.
Thank you for having me, Neil. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. I used AI to help me write that intro, and I hope it was all accurate. I was kind of impressed.
It was very good. I mean, I think it took stuff from our website and all the
Yep.
little points that I have in my talking points as well.
That's right. Good, good. Well, hopefully it didn't steal any of your content.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I'll jump in. Like I've talked to you about before, I like to try to keep these quick so I'm not boring everybody, and I want you to be doing most of the talking because I don't have much to add here. So my first question for you is, just to start us off, can you walk us through a typical tenant build-out process from the first phone call to the final punch list?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing that I'm going to start with sets us apart is we like to be involved very early. If you've got a site, and I know one we walked the other day, even if it's a, possibility, even if it's not your listing or you're representing the potential buyer or leaser or whatever, and we want to be able to come in there from the get-go and give you a hot budget, give you some roundabout numbers for what it is. Because what we identify in the build-out phase is the biggest thing that, can close a deal is being able to have accurate numbers on the front end where you can close, the lease. You can get a lease signed, LOI signed, et cetera. And to be able to have that on the front end is a big part. And so that's kind of where we try to start most of the time. The other times is when somebody says, hey, we've got a property, we've got a set of plans, whatever the case is, and we try to, go and provide pricing based on it. But the earlier we get in, the more we can help with the entitlements, with the zoning, with all the pieces of the pre-construction that typically a GC doesn't want to fool with. We like that. We want to be involved into that decision making and talk about, what is the use of this facility? What are the practicalities of the construction of it? So that's a big part of it. But to kind of carry through the end is prep with the entitlements, prep with the budget, and then go into a construction. And we kind of pride ourselves on getting stuff done, ahead of schedule most of the time. And that's just because we've got a great subcontractor base here in Middle Tennessee. We've got a great on-field team where we have some in-house people, and we have a great project management team that is able to push to get materials delivered, subcontractors there, and to overall just communicate with the client. And so then by the end of it, by the end of the build out, we're handing this off, and we're still there with that tenant, with the broker, and whoever else is involved in that for a few months, and really beyond that. If they have a question about something, even if it's out of the formal warranty phase, we're there to talk about it and help out with what the problem is.
I love that. Yeah, that's super helpful. And then one of the things that obviously you mentioned, we've walked through a building together, and hopefully we'll walk through many more. But one of the things that stood out to me that I thought was unique is just the spectrum of the things that you can do. So do you mind giving a little bit of a summary of what all you guys can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll kind of start at the very beginning. So we started doing tenant build-outs, tenant improvements, hence TI Builders.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a broad net. And we started doing a lot of retail back in the day, commercial build-out, just general commercial. And really Middle Tennessee, when we came here in 2014, the industrial space has just exploded in Middle Tennessee. And so we really leaned into that. And that is kind of our bread and butter nowadays. And it's going in there, building out an office space. And let's just say there's an empty, brand new warehouse, is doing a spec office, putting in some more doors if they need them. And then on the flip side is, let's say you have an existing facility and you need to do a make ready, or you need to, transition a tenant into there that's been empty for a while, just like one we looked at the other day, is just, get it up to date, get it clean, and get it ready for a tenant move in. So we kind of, specialize in anything getting ready for a tenant, is what we like to say, whether that's basic cosmetics or whether that's a full gut and rebuild.
And you guys will do more than just the office space, right? You could price out paving the lot or punching out a dock door or things that, I think a lot of times people think of tenant improvements and they kind of think just office space, but it sounds like you guys can do the full spectrum.
Absolutely. We have experience with interior, exterior, all the site improvements there. We understand that with industrial, what sells a lot of times is those amount of dock doors and, the pit levelers and all of those components that go into those facilities. And so we strive to stay up to date with those trends and what needs to go on in there, and what, lease rates are for that type of stuff, so we can justify our pricing on some stuff as well. But we can do anything from the office space all the way to inside the warehouse and outside on the site itself.
Awesome. Perfect. And then another thing that you spoke about a couple minutes ago is your timing. You guys are really good at getting things done quickly, and I can vouch for that. Talk a little bit about your timing and your guys' policy, what you target.
Yeah,
timeline is.
most definitely. So, let's just say, I'll fuck you to an example, and we may just use one that we went on, is, we may meet with a broker or agent out at a property, and we strive, if it's just a hot budget, if there is no, if there's no tenant that's already identified and they're just trying to get it a make ready or just have an idea of what it would cost to move in here, we try to get it out in 3 to 5 days. On 3 to 5 business days. And if there is a push, it's like, look, I need to get this Wednesday, and they're going to hopefully sign an LOI if they have a good budget by Friday, then we will push to get that budget over to you guys.
Awesome.
That's a big thing. We understand that timing is of the essence, and so we preach that internally because we need to be able to fulfill those promises on the outside. If we have, let's just say it's a little more detailed of, hey, we've got a tenant. Let's say they're a retail store or whatever, and they need this built out, and they've got an idea. We are a design build firm, so we have architects we work with, and we will work with that client, we have a floor plan, MEP plan, and figure out what it needs to happen to bring their vision to life. And, that process, depending on what the scope is, it takes anywhere from, a few weeks to a few months. And then we're kind of pricing along, in tandem with it. So the time we get the plans, we've got a pretty good budget. And so when you get into a solidified project that's not a hot budget, then we can typically, it takes anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, just depending on really the pace of the client.
Right. Awesome. And I think that's a huge edge. I think, like you said, timing is everything. One of the veterans at our company that used to be the broker manager used to always say, time kills deals. And so it really matters that you can move quickly. Another thing that I've noticed that you guys do that I want you to speak on a little bit is the way that you send your budget in kind of a list format. And the way that I understand it is you can kind of pick and choose and plug and play what you do and don't want to do, and it simplifies the process.
Yeah, we try to make it as simple as we can. There's a lot of jargon in construction, a lot of terminology that both brokers and tenants, definitely tenants, probably don't understand what's going on. And so we try to break it down by division, by CSI division, and then break it down further and to say, look, this is, the water coolers, or this is the bubblers and the toilets. We break it down, and it's like, hey, if you want to not change out the ceiling tiles, you can pull that out. If you want to change out the tiles and not the grid, we try to break it out as best we can, because we understand there are budgetary restraints with tenants, with brokers trying to get these deals done. So we try to give as much information as we can and work with the tenant. We're trying to, to be transparent. We're trying to get the job as much as anybody else. And so it's like, what do we need to do to get this job? what is the scope that's desired. And so, yes, we try to be as detailed as we can in our proposals. That way, everybody can look at it and understand what's going on, and it can be transparent on,
Right.
hey, why is this line item so hot? Well, you can break it down, and it's because of, dock doors or because of
Yeah.
the pavement outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've noticed that's a super helpful thing that you guys do. And like you said, it's simple, and we all need simple, especially like you said, a lot of times there's jargon. I use jargon in conversations with my clients a lot, and they're like, what does that mean? And I'm like, oh, yeah, sorry, I need to remember not to speak that way. And so I found it super intuitive reading through y'all's checklist. And so I wanted to talk about that. And then you did mention something about budgetary a little bit ago. Would love to hear what are some ways that if I'm a landlord or a tenant, what are some ways that I can save money on a build out?
Yeah. We term it as value engineering. I know you've heard that term as well.
Mm-hmm.
We try our best if a client comes to us and says, hey, look, this is what we're trying to do, but we are on a budget. And this is our vision. We will try our best to find, the best, quality but affordable,
Right.
equipment, material, ideas to change. I mean, even design, especially if we're doing design build and we have an architect involved, how can we design this space to save the most amount of money? So
Right.
we can really put on those kind of cost savings glasses.
Mm.
Some clients, don't, their budget's unlimited. They're public companies,
Right.
they're moving in. Time is more important than price. So we can
Mm-hmm.
kind of throttle between time and price. Most
Okay.
people value the time. But the price part of it is, how do you save money? It's just a conversation, and we just go line by line. Where can we pull? Where can we decrease, et cetera?
Right. And you guys have, say it's the flooring, you have three or four different options, all different prices, and you can present all those different options, I'm sure, kind of
Yep,
through every line item.
absolutely.
Okay, perfect. And then you mentioned you might have already captured everything that you want to say on this just through the other questions, but what do you believe sets TI builders apart from other groups that are like you guys?
Yeah, great question. We pride ourselves on being very connected with our clients in the sense of, we have branches in Dallas, in Sacramento, Tampa, Boston, Allentown, Pennsylvania, and here in Nashville. So we are a fairly large company. But when you're talking to, TI, you're talking to Alex Cimarelli, Mike Cimarelli, the partners. Mike created the company back in '88. You're talking to the ownership
Hmm.
because they are so heavily involved. It's not a board of directors sitting at the top. So we have that big contractor ability and capabilities, but we have the ability also to have a relationship with our clients in a very
Yeah.
genuine way because we want it to be genuine. We want to be friends. Our theme that we have in our business development department that I really try to champion is make friends and then make clients.
Yeah.
You're friends with people that then want to work with you. And that's the
Mm.
approach we're trying to take. We're not trying to cold call and do all of that where we're trying to sell them something right off the bat. Let's go build connections and genuine relationships in the market and let's just see where that goes. And
Yeah.
it served us well for the past, 30, 40 years.
That's awesome. And I've noticed that come out in the way that you guys work, absolutely. And even I think the way that you guys offer, hey, I understand there's a chance that they don't do this work. We're still happy to come quote it,
Yeah.
and we'll do it quickly and we'll do it thoroughly. And I think that's super helpful. I think a lot of times companies are very expectant, and so,
Yeah.
hey, if I'm going to price this, I need to know that there's some sort of commitment. And it's just hard. It's hard to know sometimes.
The way we look at it, and again, to be transparent, is let's say that you've got a deal that, you're trying to get a price on to get this tenant to sign, but, they may not even do it or whatever the case may be. You may call and just say, hey, can I please get a budget on this? Absolutely.
Right.
Because us coming, in clutch for you during this point in time will hopefully be, reciprocated on when you have a
Right.
deal. We want to help each other. And that's why I say, and I'm going to plug a Middle Tennessee thing in right now. I've moved to Nashville at the beginning of the year. And what I've found more than anything, and I say this to everybody, is everybody helps each other. Everybody is
Mhm.
very willing to help you along your journey, in your business and whatever endeavors you're trying to do, because most people are transplants and people have been
Yep.
sitting in the exact same spot you are.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
for me, I hope to be able to help other people as well. And so we kind of take that same philosophy with the company in general is that,
Yeah.
hey, they need help. They need a budget. Let's just get them a budget. It won't take us a few days to put it together. And then, we'll see what happens later on down the road.
No, absolutely. That's so key in business development, and I think a lot of people miss that, and in turn miss a lot of business. And to your point, long-term relationships. Nobody wants to be that, one-time transaction type of person. People want to have a relationship over a long period of time. Do you have a favorite or most challenging build out that I know you're relatively new to the company, but do you have any projects that stand out to you specifically?
Well, in retrospect, I was not here for it, but we did a few projects down at Fifth and Broadway, and I live downtown. And so
Yeah.
just being able to look out my window and see some of those projects is kind of exciting and go to those projects. I think we
Yeah,
did
I can imagine.
we did a few projects down there. I don't want to lie and say which ones it was. I'd have to pull up the list, but I know
Right.
having just a hand in a to me, kind of a staple in my life is just having Assembly Food Hall. I raid
Yeah.
that place about every week. And so it's nice to be able to have projects that are well known in the area. And, what's probably the most interesting and favorite project for me on a personal level, too, that's not a, exciting one probably for most people, but is these industrial buildings.
Yeah.
I've never walked through one of those before a few months ago.
Mm.
And when I walked through, I was like, man, it took me 6 minutes to get from one edge to the other. I'm like, these
I
things
know.
are massive. So it's pretty cool.
It is. It's pretty wild. That's awesome though. I didn't actually realize that you guys did work on Fifth and Broad. So that's
Yeah.
incredible. Is there a mistake that you often see tenants or landlords make during a build out or a piece of advice that you have?
One of the biggest things that we see is not checking zoning. So
Mm.
let's just say there's a dentist office and you're trying to put in a dentist office in an existing one. Well, you've got to double check and make sure that's not a conditional use permit, or you've got to make sure that that's zoned properly because they may have an exception to be able to be in there, but that conditional use goes away with that other tenant.
Right.
And so being able to check on that stuff is probably the biggest piece, especially in Middle Tennessee where zoning laws are a little more stringent,
Right.
and they're cracking down on that a good bit. So having the preparation up front, and that's something we have, and I'm going to talk about this for a second. We have a pre-construction checklist that's internal.
Mm.
And
Awesome.
even if we have, and we did one nail salon the other day. A lady called and says, "Hey, want to put in?" It was a hair salon actually. Want to do a hair salon, and we this is the building we have. We're fixing to sign a lease this week. Can you give us a budget before we sign? And when we looked at it, we're like, we can give you a budget, but just looking at it was in Franklin, like the amount of parking spaces you have to have per the amount of seats that's in there and per
Mm.
amount of
Right.
employees. And for every chair you've got a stylist and you've got a customer. And so they needed, I think, 12 parking spots. And we're like, there's 3 parking spots here. So before you sign this, we might want to call Franklin and see what the chances of getting a exception is for this. And so they ended up getting exception, but we did not, the budget was not, created until after they got that going, and she didn't sign the lease until then. And so, that's one of the things that, that was a tenant actually calling us instead of a broker. But we
Yeah.
try to look out for both sides of it. We don't want to delay the deal, but we also don't want to create a bad deal for both the broker and the tenant on
Absolutely.
this is not going to work out, and they get to due diligence phase and they find out they can't zone it or they can't have the parking or whatever. So we have a checklist internally that we go through just to kind of make sure that we're not, doing something ahead of, putting the cart before the horse. And so we try to go through some of those entitlements internally.
That's awesome. Would you say, I mean, going back to my question about what makes you guys different, would you say that's something that you guys could add to your list? Because I guess my question is that something that not every GC is going to do? That pre-project checklist
Yeah, a
that
hundred percent.
assures that.
100%. That's something that we try to, pride ourselves on that we do differently. There are other people, design build firms, they do it a lot more often. A
Right.
GC that bids just off of plans and against other bidders, they're probably not looking at that. I would like to think, just in my experience in the past few years in industry, that there's probably not as many that go as deep as we do with our checklist. I mean, it's a 25
Right.
point, I think it's 26-point checklist of what all we're looking for. And we're trying to check those boxes. And then we give that report to, it's almost like a due diligence report before they even sign a lease because we're just having to do it internally anyway.
Right. Right. That's awesome. Okay, and then kind of shifting to materials in the market and all that. Have you, and again, you might be new, but I'm sure you've heard this. Have you seen an uptick in cost of material since, I guess post-COVID, but now even with the tariff problem and
hmm
all that as well?
It's interesting. I started in the industry, construction industry, I guess, right in 2020. And so
Okay.
my experience has all been kind of not post COVID, but during COVID, lumber
Yep.
shot up and it kind of stayed. It leveled out a little bit.
Yeah.
It is, I tell you, the price increases are real. They're not as probably as exaggerated as some of the residential world and some of the other stuff that we see.
Okay.
What we see is lead times are still lagging. Supply chain issues still
Interesting.
linger
Okay.
5 years later after the pandemic. Of there's just still a kink in it because there's not
Hmm.
enough workers to go out there and do it. And that's what we see is like millwork. Like we have at the front end of a project when we're looking for subcontractors, we kind of have the first five or six that we're hitting hard, and it's mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and then long lead items. So
Okay.
millwork is long lead items. If we need cabinetry, and that may be one of the last thing that's installed, and it may be a 6 month project, but we've got to get on that ball because their lead times are so long in today's
Mm.
world with their material and their supply. And you also have to kind of figure in mistakes, figure in
Right.
damage coming in or whatever, because that's the other thing with the workforce is delivery isn't quite what it used to be either. You may get material on job sites and 20% of it's damaged, and it's like, well, we
Right.
gotta reorder and do this, and so it creates challenges.
Okay. Interesting. And then as far as another question I have is, are you seeing any trends in green building, energy efficiency, or code related upgrades that clients should know about?
In Tennessee, it's not as prevalent as other
Yeah.
states. It's a cost constraint thing. Those LEED certified buildings, green buildings, they definitely they take a toll on the budget. And so there will be some people, and we've seen it where people come in, I want to be real energy efficient, and we give them a
Yeah.
budget for that. And it has nothing to do with the labor part of it. It's pure material.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
with the cost of material, green material, and sustainable material, it's just higher. And so
Right.
that's unfortunately where most people cut out first. I'm not going to cut out a feature of the building. I'm going to cut out, green sheetrock or
Yeah.
whatever. That's going to change their mindset once they start seeing numbers. Some people that are committed to that, and I commend them for it, are okay with the price and are
Yeah.
ready to move forward with it. But with Middle Tennessee, it's a little less. And with us doing industrial buildings and even some retail build out, it's just, it's not prevalent.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's see. If you could give one piece of advice to a landlord or a tenant, and I'll add here, or even a broker about navigating their next build out, what would it be?
Well, I'm gonna repeat myself is
Yeah.
call us early.
Yep.
Get if you've got a ten again, if you're walking a space, and I'll say this to whoever's listening to this call, if you are walking a space for the first time with a potential tenant or whoever's interested, it is no sweat off our back to
Mm.
come walk and just sit in the background and just be
Yeah.
there to offer some advice on, hey, that's possible, this is not possible, this is an idea. And then it also gives us the chance to hear what's going on for us to kind of develop an internal scope of work on our notepad, go back to office, throw together a hot, but even if it's just based on square footage on what we need to do, it gives them the ability to close that deal with a hot budget. It gives them also a value add to have their contractor kind of on in real time standby to ask some of these questions. And so
Right.
we think it benefits the client, the tenant, the broker, and it really benefits us to be able to get in early to go ahead and start laying the groundwork for our scope of work and everything. So to reiterate, call us early. That's what the piece of advice I'd give.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super helpful. And it goes back to what you have spoken about and communicated that seem to be just core values of your guys' company, that you guys are relational. You don't want
Yeah.
that. You're not just motivated by the transaction. You want to come alongside your clients for a long period of time,
Yeah.
which is awesome. And I know people that hear this are going to be excited to hear that. What are some jobs, I don't know how much you can share and you can speak on that, but what are some jobs you're working on now or about to finish up that people
Yeah.
should know about?
Absolutely. So we have a few jobs in Lebanon over there. I forget the street name. I want to say it's Alley Good or something,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
it's out there. We've got those buildings that we've been working out as far as doing some tenant build out, some office spec office stuff, air park commerce. Doing
Okay.
that out there. There's obviously tons of activity going on. We've been doing a few build outs. We've got in those conversations, and so with an exciting project like air park commerce, it's nice to be a part of those conversations and hear what's
Yep.
going on. But those are the big industrial things that we're kind of working on that's notable. The one personally exciting one for me as well also is we just wrapped up Playa Bowl, which is a acai bowl place
Oh
downtown
yeah.
on Fifth Avenue or Rep John Lewis Way, and it's an old subway building, and so it's right near me. I frequent it pretty often, but just having that's a very I don't know if you went by it, but it's got a big mural on the outside. It's just stands out in downtown for
Mm,
that area.
cool.
And just knowing that TI Builders, was able to build that out was exciting. So kind of the
Yeah.
industrial stuff out by the airport in Lebanon, and then we have some stuff downtown. So we're proud of what we're doing.
Yeah, it also speaks to your guys' versatility. Y'all can cover a lot. Okay, awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time and jumping
Yeah.
on with me. I do think that you've communicated a lot of your value, and to vouch for you guys, I've experienced it. I think you guys are doing really well there, and want to commend you guys for that. And then obviously, I don't know, this wouldn't be worth much if I didn't give our listeners a way to reach you specifically. So if you want to share where or how any listeners can reach you, go ahead and
Yeah,
share that.
absolutely. So yeah, I'm Justin Pack, business development for our Tennessee location. My phone number is 629-7505. You can email me. It's justinp@tibuilders.biz, B-I-Z. And then our website is tibuilders.biz as well. I'm a big LinkedIn guy. If you feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message. Would love to go grab coffee, or a lunch or dinner or whatever the case is. I just want to try to get to know as many brokers and tenants and anybody that's relevant to this conversation. Would love to connect with them either virtually or in person.
Awesome. And then I will put your information in the notes on the show, and it'll be on podcast or it'll be on Spotify and YouTube and stuff like that. So listeners will be able to find that in the comments. Justin, I really
Awesome.
appreciate it. You guys are doing awesome, and it's been fun to get to know you and build a relationship with you. And yeah, let's keep this thing going.
Absolutely. Thank you, McNeil, and appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thank you.